And so we talked about physical properties and physical changes. Now let's talk about chemical properties. So, a chemical property is any ability to produce a change in the identity of matter, right? So, this is if you're going from like H2O to H2O2, you're actually changing the identity of the matter, right? So, like I said earlier, H2O is water, but when you add that extra oxygen to it, you get H2 and then O2, that becomes hydrogen peroxide, right? So, you change the whole identity of the matter. And so some examples of chemical properties include flammability, right? So the material's ability to burn in the presence of oxygen. That is a chemical property. Reactivity is just how readily a substance combines chemically with other substances. And this I showed you earlier when we were talking about the reactivity, and I showed that image of sodium being dropped into water and it just kind of goes up in flames, right? Like a little mini explosion. So here you actually see sodium as the second of the most reactive substances on this list. And so everything in here is uh, ranked in order from most reactive to least reactive. And again, reactivity is a chemical property. And then if something is corrosive, it basically means that it can eat away at something such as metal by acid, right? So if something is corrosive, then that is one of its chemical properties, as that is that it is corrosive, right? So again, acid is corrosive. That is one of its chemical properties. And so now let's talk a little bit about the chemical changes. So chemical changes occur when a substance reacts and forms one or more new substance, right? So you know that a chemical change has occurred when there is a change in color or odor, right? So something you can think of is like milk, right? If you have milk sitting out in the counter when it's first set out there, it's going to be like a white, thick substance, right? Milk is a little bit thick depending on the kind of milk, but as it changes, it starts to get rotten, right? It starts to go bad. You will notice that it starts to turn like a greenish color. And then there's also like a change in the odor, right? So like milk starts to smell sour. Sometimes a gas is produced. Sometimes formation of a precipitate or a solid, and you can kind of see that in milk too. With that same example, is that usually chunks of milk of something start to form, a precipitate start to form in that rotting milk, and then it absorbs or releases energy, such as getting hot or cold, or light is given off. And an example of this is when you light a match, right? When you light that match, you see that or you feel the heat coming from that match, but you also realize that a light is being given off when you strike that match. And so that's an example of a chemical change, right? And you're changing the very substance of the match, especially if you let it burn down into ashes, right? It's no longer made of the same composition, right? It's no longer wood, it is now ashes.